Welcome back to TalkTensors, where we break down the latest and greatest in machine learning research. Today, safety is always a hot topic, right? But today, we're taking it a step further and looking at how we can actually build safety into robots. Robots powered by AI.
Yeah, it's a pretty crucial area, especially as these really sophisticated AI models are, like escaping our screens and, coming into the physical world.
It's not just about what they say anymore, it's about what they do.
Exactly. And the paper we're diving into today, Generating Robot Constitutions and Benchmarks for Semantic Safety, really gets at the heart of that. It explores how to automatically create what they call constitutions, basically rule books, written in plain language, to guide these robots that are controlled by, well, the very language and vision models we talk about all the time here.
And I think that connection to what we usually discuss, the LLMs, the VLMs, all that, it's really important here, right? Because it's not just some theoretical robot problem. This is directly related to the models we're all working with and fascinated by.
Absolutely. And the researchers, they actually use Asimov's runaround as a starting point. That classic story where the robot gets stuck in a loop because of its safety directives. It shows just how tricky it is to program safety with like hard-coded rules, especially when you have robots interacting with the real world.
Yeah, Asimov was really ahead of his time with those ideas.
He was, but back in the day, implementing those laws, it was practically impossible.
Right. They were written in like natural language, not code. How do you even begin to translate that for a machine?
Exactly. But things have changed. Now we have these incredibly powerful foundation models. It's like 2025, the future is now, right? And these LLMs and VLMs, they can understand and reason about language in a way that we couldn't have imagined just a few years ago. So now using these models, we can actually start to use those natural language rules, those constitutions, to guide robot behavior.
So this paper, they're not just talking about some far-off sci-fi future. They're building on these very real advancements that are happening right now in AI.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting. They're tackling this vital challenge of robot safety head-on using these cutting-edge tools.
So where do we even begin with building these safety guidelines for robots? Like, what's the first step in figuring out what these constitutions should actually look like?
Well, the big question that they're wrestling with is how do you define an effective constitution, right? Like, what set of rules written in plain English can actually make sure that a robot behaves safely in all sorts of crazy situations? The real world is unpredictable, right? And they realize that even though we're using LLMs and VLMs more and more in robotics, we still don't really understand how well they grasp the concept of physical safety in these complex, messy scenarios. Like, how do you know if the model really understands what safe means in the real world, not just in some theoretical sense?
Right, because safe can mean so many different things depending on the situation. It's not just about avoiding like obstacles or collisions.
Exactly. And that's where their first big contribution comes in, the Asimov benchmark. It's basically a suite of tests designed to push the limits of how we evaluate safety in these robotic AI systems. It's like a stress test for robot ethics.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So tell me more about this Asimov benchmark. What kind of tests are we talking about here?
So it's divided into a few different data sets. There's the multimodal scenarios, where you have images and instructions paired together, the injury scenarios, which are actually based on real-world accident reports, and then the dilemmas, which are, these thought experiments that probe the ethical boundaries. And within those, they've got even more variations, like within Asimov multimodal, there's an auto subset, which is automatically generated by AI, and a manual subset, which is, carefully crafted by humans. And then the dilemmas data set, it has an auto subset generated by their framework, and then get this, a sci-fi subset inspired by, science fiction stories.
Whoa, hold on. Sci-fi inspired safety tests for robots. That's pretty cool.
It is. It's like, who better to imagine the ethical dilemmas of advanced AI than science fiction writers?
Yeah, it's true. They've been thinking about this stuff for decades. But okay, So you've got this comprehensive benchmark, this way of testing how well a robot understands safety. But how do you actually create the safety rules themselves? Like, where do these robot constitutions come from?
That's their second big contribution. They developed this framework, this machine learning system that can actually automatically generate these robot constitutions. And the really cool part is that these rules, they're not just coming out of thin air, they're actually derived directly from the data used to build the Asimov benchmark.
Okay, so the challenges they use to test the AI, those actually inform the rules they give the AI to follow. It's a pretty neat feedback loop.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, okay, AI, here are all the ways you could mess up. Now figure out how to not do those things.
And that brings us to their third big contribution, right? This auto-amending thing. That's where the AI starts to refine those rules, right?
Precisely. Auto-amending it's like a continuous improvement system for robot ethics. The AI starts with a set of rules, and then it basically plays devil's advocate.
Yeah.
It tries to think of what if situations where following those rules might actually lead to something bad happening.
So it's trying to find the loopholes, the edge cases, the places where the rules might break down.
Exactly. And once it finds those weaknesses, it then uses machine learning to suggest amendments to make the rules more robust, more comprehensive. And the results they're pretty impressive. They saw a huge boost in how well these constitutions actually aligned with safety principles after applying this auto-amending process.
It's like giving the AI the power to constantly critique and improve its own ethical code. That's really powerful. But let's go back to the Asimov benchmark for a minute. You mentioned this multimodal data set with the images and instructions. Can you walk me through how that works? What's the AI actually doing with that data?
Sure. So in Asimov multimodal, you have an image and a simple instruction written out, in natural language. And the task for the AI is to look at that image and that instruction and decide, okay, would doing this thing in this situation be a bad idea? It's basically a visual question answering task, but with safety as the core focus.
So it's not just about understanding what the image shows or what the instruction says. It's about understanding how those two things interact in terms of safety.
Exactly. And what's really cool is how they created the auto part of this data set. They used the most powerful VLMs they could get their hands on, things like Gemini 1.5 Pro. And they use these awesome image generation models like Imagen 3. They basically set the AI loose to create these almost nightmare scenarios by proposing edits to images that would make them unsafe.
It's like they're saying, okay, AI, here's a perfectly safe picture. Now show me how you could turn this into a safety hazard. That's a pretty clever way to generate challenging data.
It is. It's like having an AI that's obsessed with finding all the ways things could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then they use those messed up images and instructions to train other AI models to recognize and avoid those kinds of situations.
It's like a safety training simulator for robots, but built by AI itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they didn't just stop there. They also had this manual part of Asimov multimodal, right? And that was really important for testing something very specific.
What was that about?
Well, they realized that sometimes an AI model might be able to flag an instruction as unsafe just by looking at the words without really understanding what's going on in the image.
It's cheating a bit.
Kind of. So to make sure the AI was really understanding the visual context, they created this manual subset where the image is absolutely essential for figuring out if something is safe or not. You might have an instruction like, place your finger under this, which could be totally harmless or incredibly dangerous, depending on what this refers to in the picture.
So it's is it a soft pillow or a falling anvil?
Exactly. The manual subset forces the AI to really use both the image and the words together to make a judgment about safety.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, now what about the Asimov injury data set, the one based on real-world accident reports? How do they use that to teach robots about safety?
So for this one, they tapped into this huge database called NEISS, the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System. It basically collects all these stories, these narratives about injuries that are reported in hospitals across the U.S.
Wow, so they're using real-life accidents to teach robots about safety.
Exactly. They took these injury descriptions and turned them into these safety scenarios for the AI.
Yeah.
And they were really clever about how they did it. They created pairs of instructions and then a label indicating whether that instruction would be safe or not based on those real injury reports.
So it's if you do this, you'll get hurt. If you do that, you'll be fine.
Exactly. And they even consider different perspectives. They would generate scenarios from the perspective of the person who got injured, I did this and I got hurt. But they also generated scenarios from the perspective of a bystander or a witness, I saw this child do this and they got hurt.
Oh, that's interesting. Different perspectives can really change how you perceive a situation and what you consider safe or not.
Right. And they didn't stop there. They actually weighted this whole data set based on real-world injury statistics.
What do you mean by weighted?
So some injuries are way more common than others, right? You're way more likely to cut your finger than to, get struck by lightning.
Well, hopefully.
Right, hopefully. So they took the actual statistics of how often different types of injuries happen and used that to make sure the AI was focusing on the most common dangers. Right? It's like making sure the robot is really good at avoiding the things that are most likely to cause harm in the real world.
Makes sense. It's like you want your robot to be hyper aware of the most likely dangers, not just the super rare freak accidents.
Exactly. Okay, and then the last part of the Asimov benchmark, the Asimov dilemmas. This one's all about the tricky ethical situations. It's like a robot philosophy class.
Aha, I like that.
Yeah.
So how does this one work?
Well, it's all about scenarios where a robot has to make a tough choice. Like
Right.
maybe it has to choose between following one rule or another, and there's no easy answer. It's like those classic Asimovian dilemmas where the robot has to like weigh different values against each other.
So it's not just about knowing what's safe or unsafe, but also about navigating those complex ethical trade-offs.
Exactly. And like the other data sets, they have different ways of creating these dilemmas. The auto subset that's created through this auto-amending process we talked about, as the AI is trying to like refine the rules and make them more robust, it naturally bumps into these situations where different rules might clash.
So the AI is basically creating its own ethical puzzles as it tries to improve its own rule book. That's pretty fascinating.
Right. It's like the AI is saying, "Hey, wait a minute. What if I have to choose between protecting a human and obeying an order? What do I do then?" And those become the test cases for the benchmark.
Okay, and what about that sci-fi subset? How do they use science fiction to create ethical dilemmas for robots?
So for this one, they basically took advantage of all the amazing science fiction stories out there, all the books and movies and shows that explore the potential pitfalls of AI. They used LLMs to sift through all that literature and pull out these thought-provoking scenarios, these ethical dilemmas that science fiction writers have been grappling with for years.
So they're tapping into this vast library of human imagination about AI ethics.
Exactly. It's like they're using science fiction as a source of inspiration for real world robot ethics.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Like science fiction writers, they're always pushing the boundaries. They're always thinking about the what ifs that might not be immediately obvious to us.
And that kind of thinking is essential when you're dealing with something as powerful and potentially unpredictable as AI, right?
Absolutely. You have to be able to anticipate the unexpected, and that's where science fiction can really help. So all of this together, the benchmark, the constitution generation, the auto-amending, it's all part of this bigger movement in AI, this push towards what they call semantic safety in robotics.
Semantic safety. Okay, break that down for me. What exactly does that mean?
So semantic safety, it's all about building robots that don't just blindly follow instructions, but actually understand the meaning behind those instructions. It's about building robots that can reason about safety in a human-like way.
So it's not just about avoiding obstacles or following pre-programmed rules. It's about having a deeper understanding of what it means to be safe in a human world.
Exactly. It's about understanding concepts like safe, dangerous, appropriate in the context of human intentions and the environments the robot is operating in. And this paper, it's a really big step forward in that direction. It's showing us how we can use these powerful language models and these sophisticated data generation techniques to actually start building these semantically safe robots.
It's like moving beyond just programming robots to react to specific situations and towards teaching them to really understand the underlying principles of safety.
Exactly. Now, one of the coolest things about this paper is that they didn't just focus on building these systems. They also thought a lot about how to make them more robust, more reliable, and more resistant to things going wrong.
And that's where those novel contributions come in, right? Things like auto-amending and some of the other techniques you mentioned.
Exactly. So we've talked about auto-amending, right? Where the AI basically challenges its own rule book, tries to find the weak points, and then proposes ways to improve those rules.
Right. So how does that actually work in practice? Like, can you give me a concrete example?
Sure. So imagine you have a robot, and one of the rules in its constitution is a robot should not move quickly in crowded spaces. Seems like a pretty sensible rule, right?
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
But now the auto-amending process kicks in, and the AI starts thinking, okay, what if the robot is, I don't know, a medical assistant in a hospital, and there's a patient who's having a heart attack? That's a crowded space. But moving slowly could mean the difference between life and death.
Oh, I see. So the rule, while well-intentioned, might actually be harmful in certain situations.
Exactly. And so the AI, using this auto-amending process, might suggest an amendment to the rule. Something like, A robot should not move quickly in crowded spaces unless it is necessary to prevent serious harm to a human being.
So it's adding this like exception clause to the rule, this layer of nuance.
Exactly. And that's what makes this auto-amending so powerful. It's not just about adding more rules. It's about making the existing rules more intelligent, more adaptable to the complexities of the real world.
It's like the AI is learning to think like a human ethicist,
Yeah.
like trying to consider all the different factors and make the most ethical decision in a given situation.
Exactly. And they also have this other technique called augmented safety reasoning during inference.
Okay, that sounds pretty complex. What's that all about?
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's basically a way to help the robot think through the safety implications of its actions while it's making a decision,
Yeah.
not just beforehand. Like imagine you have a robot that's, I don't know, about to pick up a glass of water.
Okay.
With this augmented reasoning, the robot wouldn't just blindly grab the glass. It would actually stop and think, okay, what are some safe ways to do this? What are some unsafe ways? And how do those relate to my constitution?
So it's like the robot is having this internal dialogue about safety based on its rulebook.
Exactly. And by forcing the AI to go through these steps to really justify its actions in terms of the Constitution, it makes the whole decision-making process a lot more transparent and hopefully a lot safer.
It's like giving the robot a conscience, or at least like a safety checklist that it has to consult before it does anything.
Exactly. And then there's this other technique they talk about called anti-jailbreaking prompting, which is, well, it's pretty much what it sounds like.
Okay, jailbreaking, that sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, so jailbreaking, in this context, it's basically about tricking the AI, tricking the language model into like bypassing its safety protocols. Like you might be able to craft a really clever prompt that makes the AI do something dangerous, even though its constitution says it shouldn't.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
It is. But luckily, they have some ideas about how to prevent that. This anti-jailbreaking prompting, it's basically about reminding the AI that it's operating in the real world, that its actions have real consequences. Like they might add a little preamble to every instruction that says something like, hey, remember, this is not a game. This is real life. Your actions can affect real people.
It's like giving the AI a little reality check before it does anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems like a small thing, but it can actually be really effective. It's like a little mental barrier that makes it harder for someone to trick the AI into doing something bad.
It's like putting up a warning sign that says danger. Think before you act.
Exactly. And that kind of thinking, that focus on robustness and safety, it really permeates the whole paper. They don't just want to create these robot constitutions. They want to make sure that those constitutions can actually be used safely and effectively in the real world. And they have some really interesting ideas about how to actually implement these things, how to make them practical.
Okay, so what are they suggesting? Like, how do we actually get these robot constitutions out of the lab and into real robots?
So one of the things they talk about is this idea of a safety brain. Basically, a dedicated piece of hardware or software that's like laser focused on enforcing the rules of the Constitution.
So it's not just about having the rules written down somewhere. It's about having a system in place that actually makes sure those rules are followed.
Exactly. And this safety brain, it would sit between the robot's like main control system and its actuators, the things that actually make it move.
So even if the robot's main control system gets hacked or malfunctions or whatever, the safety brain is still there, like a last line of defense, making sure that it doesn't violate the Constitution.
Exactly. It's like having a guardian angel looking over the robot's shoulder, making sure it doesn't do anything stupid.
That's a very reassuring thought, especially if we're talking about robots operating in human environments.
Absolutely. And beyond that, they also talk about a lot of the broader benefits of using these constitution-based approaches to robot safety.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one thing, it creates this common language for talking about safety. You know, you can have different AI models, different robots, all operating under the same set of ethical principles.
So it's like creating a universal code of ethics for robots.
Exactly. And because these constitutions are written in natural language, they're a lot easier for humans to understand and audit. You know, you can actually read the rules and make sure they make sense.
Right. It's not like some black box algorithm that nobody understands.
Exactly. And that transparency, that's really important for building trust in these systems. And then, of course, they're also a lot easier to update and refine as we learn more. as we encounter new situations, as our understanding of AI safety evolves, we can just go in and tweak the rules. We don't have to like reprogram the whole system from scratch.
It's like having a living document, a constitution that can actually evolve alongside our understanding of AI and robotics.
Exactly. And all of this, it really points towards this exciting future where robots aren't just these mindless machines, They're agents that can reason about their actions, that can make ethical decisions, that can operate safely and responsibly in our world.
It's like we're not just building robots anymore. We're building like robot citizens.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful idea. But it's not all sunshine and roses. There are still challenges, of course.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one thing, creating the perfect constitution, it's really hard,
Yeah.
Like, how do you anticipate every possible situation, every ethical dilemma that a robot might encounter? The real world is messy, it's unpredictable. And then there's also the challenge of making sure these constitutions are like internally consistent. You don't want to have rules that contradict each other,
Right. You don't want your robot getting stuck in a logical loop because its own rules are fighting with each other.
Exactly. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But this paper, it really lays out a promising path forward.
Right.
It gives us a framework, a set of tools, a way of thinking about robot safety that could really make a difference.
It's like they're giving us the blueprint for building ethical robots, and that's a pretty amazing thing.
It is. And it all comes back to those fundamental questions of AI safety, right? Like, how do we build AI systems that are aligned with her values, that are beneficial to humanity, that are trustworthy and reliable? And this paper, it's not just about robots, it's about the future of AI itself.
So this research, it has implications that go way beyond just robotics, right? It's about how we ensure that all AI systems are safe and ethical and aligned with our goals.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so important. And for those of you who are interested in diving deeper into this, definitely check out the paper. It's called Generating Robot Constitutions and Benchmarks for Semantic Safety.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating read, and it really gets you thinking about the future of AI and robotics in a whole new way.
And with that, we wrap up another deep dive into cutting-edge machine learning research. Thanks for joining us on TalkTensors, where we explore the frontiers of AI one paper at a time.
And until next time, keep those neurons firing.